Miracle at Camp Friendship, Chapter 5, Work to Do. While we were getting settled and transforming our accommodations at David's Hideaway, Mr. Friendson was preparing for some transforming of his own. Back at the camp office, all kinds of cleaning supplies, garbage bags, buckets, rakes, shovels, hammers, and other odds and ends greeted us. Aunt Ruth and Uncle Jake rocked and watched with interest. I could tell they were glad to see the camp come alive with activity. I even caught a hint of a smile on Aunt Ruth's face. The sun was shining brightly, but beginning to dip toward the west. All our work getting settled at the lodge had warmed us up, and I thought of taking off my jacket, but then the thought crossed my mind that something might crawl into it. Mr. Friendson blew his whistle. That startled Uncle Jake, and he adjusted his hearing aid. Someone started to snicker, but Pastor Gentle quickly raised an eyebrow. He didn't have to say it. We all knew. Honour the face of the old man and fear thy God. Our observer watched with interest. His plans hadn't included an active group of young people. "Okay," began Mr. Friendson. "Maybe you haven't noticed, but Camp Friendship could do with some sprucing up." "That's an understatement," announced Ronnie. Mr. Friendson continued. "There are some big jobs needing to be done, but there are many little tasks that would help. We're here to have a good time and have some new experiences. Pastor Gentle and I have been friends of Uncle Jake and Aunt Ruth for many years. This camp for young people has been their life of ministry, but they're getting up in years now and can't keep up the camp. Highland Church and Harmony Chapel have agreed to help keep the ministry alive. We can help by doing a few odd jobs around here this afternoon. What do you say? Should we help our friends?" Booker stepped forward. He crossed his arms high on his chest and looked down his nose. In his most dignified voice, he said, "As my pastor would say, a friend in need is a friend indeed." Pastor Gentle laughed right out loud. He rocked forward and back on his heels. His whole torso shook good-naturedly in amusement at Booker's imitation of him. "Of course we'll help," we all chimed in. "All right then." Again Mr. Friendson resumed his drill sergeant manner. "Girls, here are buckets, rags and window cleaner. You may start cleaning windows on the inside. Start with the dining hall, then do the camp office. You may also do the windows at the lodges, but please be sure all the windows are closed and locked when you are finished." For some reason, Mr. Friendson seemed to be putting special emphasis on closing and locking windows. Turning to us boys, he continued, "Boys, I need someone to pick up pine cones and tree branches that have fallen on the ground." "Why don't we do that?" I said to Ronnie. He agreed, and we got some heavy leaf bags for the pine cones. Mr. Friendson instructed us to pile all the tree branches in an open spot where they could be burned later. AC and J. Michael ended up helping Mr. Thriftmore repair the shingle over the dining hall door, as well as the office steps and some broken windows and door locks. Only later did he mention that someone or something had gotten into the kitchen uninvited. AC suggested that it might have been a bear. He said his dad remembered a bear had caused some problems around the camp once, when he was a camper. I was glad I didn't know all that before Ronnie and I volunteered to gather up pine cones. Mr. Thriftmore felt it was more likely the work of a mother raccoon. Racer and Booker worked with Pastor Gentle to clean windows on the outside. They had to spray and knock down some wasps' nests, but most of the wasps had died because of the cold nights. There's just something about working together and helping friends in need. It sure feels good. All the while, Mr. Friendson circled around like a hawk to give help and direction where needed. The ominous whistle hung around his neck, ready for use at any time. He was careful about blowing it, though. He didn't want to blast Uncle Jake's eardrums again. While we all worked enthusiastically, the uninvited visitor in the shadow of the trees watched with growing interest. he could not help but notice the shabbiness and disrepair of the camp. It had certainly changed over the years since he had last seen it. Since none of us were aware of the shadowy observer, we forged ahead with our voluntary chores. Ronnie and I gathered fallen branches and pieces of wood and carried them to the pile. Some were so large and heavy it took both of us to drag them. At times Ronnie appeared to be different in this back-to-nature setting. I thought it must be because he was away from the bad influences of the city. He still bragged a lot, but I thought being buddies must be helping him feel more accepted. After we finished with the branches, we each got a bag and began to fill it with pine cones. There were lots of them, and we wandered around picking them up. "Look," I said softly, "a squirrel was standing on his hind legs looking at us." When we moved, he ran. We dropped our bags and tried to follow him. He ran up a pine tree, skidded across a branch, and then leaped to the branches of a gigantic oak. We stood there watching him for a moment. His tail swished up and down rhythmically. He seemed to be listening. "Maybe he's sending some kind of message," Ronnie speculated as he took a step toward the tree. Mr. Squirrel raced down the trunk and then scurried across the dry leaves and the deeper into the forest. Finally, he got so far ahead of us that we lost him, or maybe he was hiding among the branches. The sun had set and it wasn't easy to see. "We lost him," Ronnie said disappointedly. He gave one last look around. Suddenly, he jerked toward me and slapped my arm. "Pudge, where are our pine cones?" I looked around. "I don't know. Where did we leave them? Which way did we come? Where's the camp?" My breath caught and my face felt hot. I didn't know. "We're lost! Help! We're lost! Somebody help us!" Ronnie panicked and I felt a tightness in my chest, almost as if I couldn't breathe. "It's your fault!" he screamed. His face was red with anger, but fear showed in his eyes. "What are we going to do? It's getting dark. If no one finds us soon, who knows what will happen? There might be wolves or bears or even criminals hiding in these woods." At the time, we had no idea that a suspicious person really was there in the woods. Then Ronnie started putting all the blame on me. "It's your fault," he accused. Quickly, I remembered a wonderfully comforting thought. "Ronnie," I said, "we'll be okay. God is watching over us. He knows where we are." The suspicious onlooker had also been following us and watching our every move. It wasn't until later that we found out about it. No telling what Ronnie would have done. He had had a clue. For the moment, I had to find another strategy. "Get your compass, remember? You said no one can get lost if he has a compass." "Yes, that's right," Ronnie said excitedly, and he pulled out the precious compass. Just seeing it made him feel better. "What does it say?" I asked. "Which way is back to camp?" He looked at the compass and panicked again. "A compass tells which direction you're facing, but I don't know if the camp is north or south or east or west. We're still lost." He jammed the compass back into his pocket and started accusing me again. "If you hadn't talked me into chasing that squirrel, we wouldn't be lost, buddy." Then he burst into tears. "Lord, show me what to do," I prayed. "Think, Pudge, think." Then I remembered what Grandfather Resource had taught me. Stay in one place. If you start walking, you'll probably go in circles. If you stay in one place, someone will eventually find you. "I'm sorry, Ronnie. It is my fault we're lost," I said. "We never should have chased that squirrel, and I knew better than to get out of sight of Mr. Friendson. He's probably looking for us now." The forest was darker than ever. "Listen," whispered Ronnie nervously. "What's that noise?" I listened. "You mean that buzzing noise?" "Yes," he whispered again. "I think it's cicadas. Just cicadas," I answered in a low voice, while trying to sound calm. "Will they eat us?" At that I felt some relief. No, they're just insects. They won't hurt us. Ronnie let out a big sigh. He seemed to be calming down. Wait, I said. Do you hear that? What? Just listen. We stood quietly for a second, listening intently to the night sounds that were beginning to fill the woods. Then we both heard it, as clear as anything. Jing-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. The dinner bell, we shouted all together. And it didn't sound far away. Like a shot out of a gun, as Pastor Gentle would have said. We ran toward the sound. Over a little rise, we tripped over our bags of pine cones. That sent us rolling on the ground. We were half laughing, half crying with relief and joy. You're a good buddy after all, Pudge. I'm sure glad you were with me. Not as good as the Lord, Ronnie. God's word says, I am with thee and will keep thee in all places. He was with me all the time, Ronnie. Don't you see that you need him too? Yeah, I did think about it back there, Pudge, but I don't need him now. Come on, let's go to supper. We don't want to be late. Had we been listening very closely at that moment, we might have heard a deep sigh back in the dark woods. It was a sigh that meant someone was glad we found our way back. It was also a sigh of relief that, for now, no one seemed the wiser about his being there or about the strange things that had been happening around Camp Friendship.